You are listening to the Live with Courage podcast. Learn something new. Be inspired. Visualize your future. Feel empowered. In this episode, I have a great conversation with Barry Zworestine. Barry was born and raised in Rhodesia and served in the Rhodesian Bush War. He is a trained clinical psychologist that understands the trauma service members often carry with them. Barry now works with Australian service members and veterans and is an author of 2 books, Which Way is Your Claymore Facing and Which Way is Your Warrior Facing? You can find the former on Amazon and the latter on his website. Can we start with your military service and how your transition went for you?
Okay, yeah. So, we need to travel back in time, a long way back in time to 1975. So it's that's a long way back.
Yeah, fun time.
And I think I've been at university for about 4 years. I was kind of one of those guys who didn't do very well at school at all. I think I discovered working in education that in fact I had a couple of learning issues, and my parents hadn't figured that having sort of 8 teachers giving me extra lessons might be any indicator that there were problems. And so the only thing I said, well, what do I study? And they said, well, just be a teacher. And I went, okay, for somebody who hated school. So I'd spent 4 years doing a degree and then a postgraduate high school teacher's diploma, and then swore after that I was never, ever going to walk into high school. And then I got called up to the Rhodesian army. And in those days, if you didn't go back, you were never allowed back in the country. And so I decided I would go back in. And my intake in 1975, the beginning of the year, was, I think, the biggest intake, or one of the biggest intakes that went in, and a lot of university graduates. And so for some unbeknown reason, after initial training, I decided I'd attempt the officer training course, which was an initial 3-day selection, and then the training would begin. And where it came from, I have no idea, because I have one of my learning issues is a zero sense of direction. So even to this day, I will walk out of a building and it's like, I always say to my wife, God has just recreated the map. I have no idea left or right.
Oh no.
I can't even see landmarks. It's everything gets rearranged. And fortunately, I made it to the 3rd day of the selection, and then I fell off a large wall that we were going over, because I'd been a gymnast for many years, and I'd come in with a dislocating shoulder and hadn't said a word. And so that had dislocated, I'd fallen off, and that was the end of the officer training course, thank God. So then the next challenge was, well, what?
You said, thank God.
Oh yeah. It was not a good idea for me to lead men in a war. So I thought, well, I'll become a medic. So our medic course was, I think it was based on the Israeli medic training, which was, I think we were one of the most highly trained medics. We could do cut downs. There was no drugs we couldn't administer. We could do small operations, drips, everything under the sun. So it was a very, very intensive course for 3 months. And my intake already had left. They'd already gone operations. So they suggested I go to a certain place. And I said, look, I can't go there because we did a gymnastics display there when I was at school. It was a coal mining town. I'm allergic to coal. I'm going to end up in hospital. So they said, well, there is a place on the border of Rhodesia, very mountainous, very beautiful. I went, yep, I know that place. Would you like to go there? I went, yep. So I arrived there, a couple of us, I think they sent 4 or 5 medics there. We arrived, and normally our training, we remain in MI rooms, and we don't really go operational. So we arrived and they said to me, there's your 4-man stick and off you go. So, okay. So I packed up, I don't know if I can always send you a picture, but in those days, equipment wasn't as good as it is today. So I layered everything. There's bags all over me with drips and drugs and hand grenades and magazines and the weapons and everything. And off I went, and I operated for 7 months on the border there. It was on the Mozambique border, very mountainous, a lot of walking. We weren't, we didn't have the luxury of many chopper rides. So I think I had one helicopter ride to get dropped into a stop group, but otherwise we walked and did that for 7 months, and had some very interesting experiences over those 7 months. And then at the end of it, they extended my national service training. And I thought, well, I probably need to go back and study more because I'd spent 4 years doing something I never wanted to use. But the only thing I could do, because I'd not taught at all, the only thing open to me was becoming a teacher in speech and hearing defects, Wani Wabbit, Thamith, and testing hearing.
Oh, okay.
So I went back to South Africa and did that, went back to university. So I was back in university 2 weeks after being operational. And I guess because in our time there was no understanding about PTSD, it was almost post Vietnam, tail end of Vietnam. We had no knowledge of it. So I left, arrived in residence where I was staying, and all I knew was that I had constant headaches for about 3 months, which I don't normally get. I was waking up maybe 20, 30 times a night, and I had a lot of body aches and pains, all of which is very unusual for me. And that was it. Many years later, I said to a friend of mine, how was I? What was your reflection? He said, geez, you were constantly a lot of pressure of speech and very hyped. And I don't really have an insight into that. So I don't think I had PTSD, I think, or PDS. I think I had what I'd really more call is combat stress,
Okay.
which is, the hypervigilance and the physical manifestation of being under states of hypervigilance. Because in my war, we only operated in four-man sticks. It wasn't a special force protocol. It was standard operating protocol. And in my area, terrorists walked in groups of 12 to 300. So we'd be trotting off in territory where large numbers of people were working in as well. So it was only on reflection, I think, many, many years after when I went back and retrained as a clinical psychologist, arrived back in Australia after meandering around the world over a couple of emigrations, that and working with the veterans for a couple of years, that I realized I wasn't exactly as processed as I thought I was. And even today, we walk into a restaurant, my wife will always give me the chair facing the door. And when she does that, there's this it's like kind of a self-reflection going, this is insane, but it kind of makes sense. It's like my body just wants to face doorways, and I rationalize it by certainly saying that, well, in this day and age, given the situation in many countries, facing doorways is not a bad thing anyway. But
Right.
I often say to the veterans, there's a level, I call it functional trauma. If you're just jumping when a car backfires, or you're facing doorways, or in very busy shopping centers, you get a bit overwhelmed and you're scanning a lot. If that's all you have and it's not impacting on your well-being or your relationships with those around you, you're okay. So yeah, look, the war.
I like that statement that you just made of, if you got to face the door and that's what you got going on, like, you're okay, it's fine as long as nobody else around you seems to be impacted by it. My kids
Yeah,
do the same thing for me. I have to work with two lefties, so I got to make sure that they can sit properly at the table so they can eat and not
yeah,
elbow people. And then they know that
yeah,
I need to have at least a line of sight to the exit.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and it's just, that's how we roll. It becomes
exactly.
common.
You look, and I think instead of pathologizing a lot of the symptomatology, we need to normalize that it's okay. I'll say to the guys, it's all right. So if you're facing a doorway, how's your relationship within your family? How are your social connections? What's your depression, stress, and anxiety? What's your alcohol use like? And generally, if they're doing well, what's the problem? Rather work on the issues that are impacting on people's lives. And there are far more complex issues of who are you after you return, your loss of tribe, grief, redefining a sense of identity, whether there are any moral injuries, whether your own, especially today where um, if you seem to have issues, you can be rapidly sidelined out of the military and medically discharged. Now, that's when your family, in a way, turns against you.
Right.
So, there are all these issues they need to be focused on, not the ones that really are livable and quite functional.
Right. And that's matter of fact, that's something that I had a conversation with Dr. Sullivan about. She
Mm,
did her dissertation on veteran critical theory,
mm,
where instead of trying to get veterans to 100% become civilians and not have any connection to their military-ness,
mm,
for lack of better terms,
mm.
it's about understanding who they are and seeing what the positives are of those things. Our adaptability, the way that we make quick decisions, our integrity,
Yeah,
our belief in excellence. Those things sometimes cause issues in a civilian workplace.
yeah,
Our directness when we speak to them,
yeah.
um, but they don't have to be. And I think that kind of goes towards what you were just mentioning. Like if it's really not that big of an issue, why are we making it that big of an issue?
Yeah, look, I think
So,
they're complex issues. I think the thing that I often talk about and I speak a lot on is I think the transitional complexities is a huge one. And what came to me a couple of weeks ago is very much like a triangle with an arrow going forward and then that arrow dividing left and right to the base of the triangle. Now, the forward direction is what I call an operational process that requires all the same levels of planning, organization, equipping yourself, territorial familiarity. And that's the one where you move into civilian life. And I often say that civilian life is in many ways the next operational zone because it is. It's bewildering, it's different. And it's not going to adjust or adapt to us. We need to learn how to navigate with it and also help civilians to become more educated about who we are. I mean, I think it's a two-way process. So the one is an operational movement forward, and the other one I talk about, it's a rescue mission backwards. And the rescue mission is what I often say to the folk I'm working with is, would you leave somebody behind in war after a contact? And the answer always is an unequivocal no. Of course, you don't leave anyone behind. So my next question is, well, why have you left yourself behind? And you leave yourself behind when you deny who you are as a veteran and you have shame around it and you don't want to stand up for who you are and you don't feel you've deserved the right to wear your medals. And that's often been a very big one, the not good enough box.
oh my
And
gosh, I was just
that's,
talking to somebody about that with
yeah,
me.
it's huge.
For
Yeah,
11
it's huge.
years after my service,
Yeah,
I did not call myself a veteran. I didn't want
yeah,
to be addressed as a veteran.
yeah,
I didn't feel like I deserved anything. I felt a lot of shame around my career. um wow, like, so a lot
yeah.
of others go through that then, not just me.
Uh, Christina, I really want to stress, and to anyone who's going to be listening to this, is that you're certainly not alone. I learned to track this by, I realized we have a march here in Australia called the Anzac March, and the Rhodesians are allowed to march. And I didn't go for many years because somehow I'd buried this whole thing about who I was and forgot about it, and then started to reclaim it. And then I arrived, and we'd have the RLI, which is the equivalent of your guys, the commandos, and then we'd have our Salute Scouts and our SAS, our reconnaissance units and our SAS, the Special Force, always a couple of them. And I remember standing there feeling quite inadequate because we certainly operated and we fought a war, but we were not in the cross-border pursuits. We were in special forces, and that haunting sense of not being good enough and feeling uncomfortable wearing your medals or standing clear and strong in your own identity. And then I started asking the guys, and they would never volunteer that. The first question I always asked the guys was, how do you feel about putting on your medals and going marching on commemorative ceremonies? And there was always, in probably 90% of the people I've sat with, there was this kind of awkward moment. And I realized how many people don't feel good enough. And even having talked to a number of special force individuals where they went, well, I didn't see as much action. You can be highly trained, and your deployments may never put you in situations. You may never even go into territory. And so the thing that came on in my head was, well, where does this stop? Because from the normal conscripted guys right up to the special force folk, everybody, so many people seem to be haunted by this not being good enough. So that bottom arrow I saw as two components. The one is you need to go back and you need to heal the parts of yourself that don't feel good enough, that have lost your tribe, that are struggling with grief. There might be operational impacts or trauma, which requires more specialized treatment, but you need to heal and take time to do your first aid and your recovery treatment on yourself in whatever form is needed or required. The second one is to identify the strengths and the values of who you are, and then bring yourself back in the process and in the journey towards civilian life. So I tend to feel that effective transitioning is not just a one-way focus on let's get you in civilian life, let's get you a job. um, it needs to have that forward direction, going back into healing wound, preserving identity, valuing who you are, and combining that as you move into civilian life. Then I think we are creating an effective map of the territory and giving people compasses to navigate their way through their internal territory and their external territory.
That makes a lot of sense, and a lot of times, veterans are told, just switch. Like you mentioned in your book, you can't just change your uniform, and all of a sudden you're a civilian. Like it just doesn't work that way. It's a journey, it's a process, and a lot of people I don't think go back and get themselves and do the healing, and take that time to do those things. And sometimes you don't have the time where you kind of just have to jump in feet first. But once
Yeah.
you get settled, go back and do it, right? You got to go
Yeah.
back and
And
get yourself.
well, why should we leave ourselves behind anyway? Why is the part of us that is a veteran, or to use the word warrior, why would we want to leave that behind anyway? It's got values that I think the civilian world can benefit with: reliability, dependability, and certainly the one that's in short supply in this age is putting others first. That you actually prepared to sacrifice whatever it takes in the preservation of another. Now, that's a rare quality. So, why would we leave those values behind?
Because we don't fit in if we do. If we take
Well,
those with us, and I see you have Daring Greatly back there on your shelf, and there's a lot
yeah,
of information that Brene Brown shares about, the fitting in
yeah.
culture. And I think that's a big part of it. We want to fit in as a civilian. So we leave all of that
Mm-hmm.
amazingness because it's not considered amazing in a different arena.
Well,
Um,
Christine, if you think about it, um, adaptability and the ability to adjust and adapt is an inherent part of military training, because there's not one tool and there's not one territory. So there's a continual demand to readjust to the demands and the changes of territory. Well, as you adjusted to Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the other myriads of operations that have taken place over the years, which demand different styles of operating, whether you're in urban areas, whether you're in bush areas or mountainous areas, civilian life is just another piece of territory. That's all it is. And so if we've managed to do that in the past, why can we not take time and or get the support to learn how to adjust and adapt to civilian territory without losing the positive aspects of who you are? It's
I
just another piece of territory inhabited by people.
Right, and I think the key word you said there is the support to do so. I think
Yeah,
that's one of the missing pieces, is having
yeah,
that support piece.
yeah,
I know here in the States, when we talk about military transition, it's all about resumes, interviews, and getting your
yeah,
next job.
yeah,
It's not about dealing with the mental health toll that happens when you transition, any transition, not just military transition, between grief, shame, rejection, and all the other things that go on. But there's like an added component when you add in that military transition, because you're leaving your people. You feel like you're leaving your people in your life behind for
yeah,
something new, and oftentimes it's not what you want. And I think that's another thing that people forget is sometimes when people leave the military service,
Mm.
even ones that retire after 30 years, they don't want to leave.
No.
So that's a big aspect of it.
So the challenge, I think, is how you recreate tribe. Um, I think there are ways of still gathering aspects of your connections with mates and keeping those going. I mean, I've got a couple of really good mates around the world. They're like brothers. We, some of us, we were in the same intake. One of them, a good mate, we were medics together. Um, and we've kept those I mean, we lost each other for many years, and then thank God for technology, we found each other.
Right.
Um, there's also the different military groups around the area, around the world. Everybody's got their military groups relevant to their own companies. So I think there are ways of still keeping tribe, but you can't just have that. We still have to adjust and adapt and reconnect within a different tribe.
Right.
Now, I think the one thing that we know is inherent in the military spirit is the need for service. So I think when we take that service component in and look at how can we be of service. So for example, in Australia, the organization I work with, Open Arms, have a while ago brought in peer mentors, and they are all past serving individuals who act as mentors to the folk that I work with or the psychologists work with. So they have military folk are being given the opportunity to be of service. Now, it needn't just be service to military; it could be service in any other way. An aspect of my work is service. I'm still in tribe. I've spent nearly 19 years working for my organization, working with current serving veterans, their wives, and sometimes their kids. That is service. My work overseas is in service. So I don't think we need to lose that. And I think if we do find it, then we reconnect back into tribe. I think the other thing that we often lose, and I see a lot of that, is a lot of military folk are fit, they well. A lot of it is around physical well-being because a lot of it is body-based. Now, a lot of people transition over, and then, of course, the alcohol can kick up, a lack of exercise, excessive eating, combined with any of the moods, depressions, anxieties, transitional challenges, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And they rapidly deteriorate. Now, the one thing I've seen with all military folk, and I always say, whatever you do, you need to make sure you remain in the driver's seat of your car while you're going through tricky area. So while you're attempting to sort out what transitioning is about, what's going on inside you, in your head, in your heart, in your how you're navigating through civilian territory, if you deteriorate, so it translates into, your mood goes down, you're anxious, you're stressed, you're drinking too much, you're eating too much, and you're putting on weight. Now you don't have a sense of control. You're in this car and you're not even driving it anymore. Now, some of the more complex issues become less complex when we put people back in the driver's seat. So often, the folk I'm working with, we will acknowledge there's some complex issues we need to get to, whether it's shame, grief, and loss. But let's create some stable tools to get you back in charge. If you're not significantly handicapped or damaged, you can go for a walk, you can go collect the post, you can make your bed every day, you can look at what you eat, you can exercise, you can run, you can get fit. It's whatever level people can come in at. And often I find when we stabilize these, then the issues that felt big are not so big. Expression I often use is, I say to the guys, what was the core thing with a weapon? And they'll, well, you need to look after your weapon, don't you? And I go, yep. So then I talk to them about pull-throughs where you clean your barrel. Because if you don't clean your barrel, three things are going to happen. You're going to have an accidental discharge, which is in the human world is you shoot your mouth off. Or you're going to get a stoppage, which is what I'd call depression, anxiety. It's like it just stops you. Or you get a runaway gun where you're so out of control that you're destructive to everyone around you. So I remind people that been your weapon regularly because your functionality was determined by the effectivity of that weapon, the effectiveness of that weapon. Now, if you don't do your personal pull-throughs, what you are doing is you're asking for three things to happen. You're going to have a stoppage, a runaway gun, or an AD. So they go, okay, that makes sense. So now what, and I tend to do this within the first session or two, is I go, let's look at what personal pull-throughs you are prepared to do. So you get up every day, maybe you make your bed, and we identify a number of things that could be breathing-based, mindful meditation-based, etc., etc. And if they work on those pull-throughs, often I experience people going, wow, I feel good. I feel like I'm back in my driver's seat. Life is feeling good, and my stress and anxiety are coming down, and so my mood is coming down. So I always say, let's pull through, let's stabilize core operating protocols, and then let's see what's left.
Right, establishing that routine and
Completely.
the part that you get back as an individual is that self-care. You're taking care of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that is really important, and especially for those that don't go straight into a job, we do lose we lose that routine.
Yeah.
We don't have a time we have to get up in the morning, and we can
No.
kind of, I know I do it. I piddle around the house, so I think that is so important.
Yeah. Look, I agree. Look, there were times where because I'd sort of done about 5 or 6 immigrations, I was constantly changing, and a number of ongoing catastrophes within that as well. There was a moment where I had been I'd been living overseas, and I went back to South Africa, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was completely out of tribe. All I had was my family. My parents were there at the time. But what I did was I got up every single day, and I think at that point I was already a marathon runner. Yeah, I was already running marathons. So running was a big part of my life. And I'd put on my shoes, and I'd get up at 8 o'clock, and I'd run up. It's a mountain called Table Mountain in Cape Town. It's a massive rock. And I'd spend the day running, walking, climbing all the way to the top, run down. And I just would do that every single day. And that gave me meaning. It gave me an opportunity to process, and it gave me a sense of purpose and focus. And even today, where my life is good, everything that I have in my life I'm extremely grateful for. But I get up in the morning. I tended to. I'm fully into the Admiral McRaven make your bed stuff. I make a bed. Now my wife makes it as well, and then I get up and I do about 15 minutes of pull throughs. I do the breathing. I'm a great Wim Hof kind of character. I love his cold water and the breathing techniques. So I'll come into this room and I'll do 20 minutes of his breath work, go into the lounge, do all my physical stuff. And it's a lot of cross bilateral stuff and tapping stuff on the body. It's a great pull through, and then finish off with a cold shower. And that's every day. That keeps me in the driver's seat. If I'm in the driver's seat, I often say you can drive a vehicle through a storm. But if you're in the back seat, trying to drive a vehicle through a storm gets tricky.
Right.
So it's getting people, whatever it takes, to put people from the back seat to the front seat so they can operate from that point of view.
So what about just starting with one thing? Like, is that a good way to start, as long as
Yeah,
it's just one thing? Like, I know a lot of
absolutely.
people that are depressed, and when I get into depressed moods, I have a hard time taking a shower every day. And I know that sounds gross, but
Yeah,
it's hard to take a proper shower every day. And that's one
yeah,
of the things that when I start to feel that way, I'm like, I am going to at least take a shower every
yeah,
day. This is what I need to do for myself if I do nothing else
yeah,
today.
yeah. So you know that when mood kicks down, it's often described as you're trying to walk in syrup in a dark room. You almost feel immovable. Now, something I learned when I was running ultra marathons was that at 60 kilometers often is where the race begins, because you run out of resources. You're in a place where your body goes, nah, I don't want to do this. It's uncomfortable, and you want to go through the back door. I learned that when we move into discomfort, our greatest gift and our greatest learning and work is in the place of discomfort. Because if we can train ourselves to process discomfort and become comfortable being uncomfortable, the changes within us are profound. If we want to heal by always staying in our zone of comfort, well, we've got a problem, I believe. And I acknowledge that. So if somebody's severely depressed, getting into the shower is a zone of discomfort because you don't want to go. So I will often challenge people and go, come on, collect the post or have a shower every day. And then I add a little bit of a kick on it if they're willing. And I go finish off on 10 seconds of cold shower. Or it's like I'll have now, yeah, I'll talk about that later. But that cold shower is that zone of discomfort. When we process zone of discomforts long enough, they become comfortable. So every time we're in an emotional zone of discomfort, we still know we wired in at some level that we've got the capacity to move and do. So I think, as you described it, you don't back off from your zone of discomfort because then you just stay in bed all day. Or you may have stayed in bed all day for a couple of days, but there's that defining point where you know your brain goes off and you're either going to go into that zone of discomfort and do what you kind of know you should do but don't want to do, or you're going to go downhill quickly. When
Right.
you're in the downhill quickly, that the zone of discomfort then and the challenge within that is to pick up a phone and phone your VA, phone a psychologist, phone a counselor, phone a mate, and go, I need help. So even the asking for help is becoming comfortable in your discomfort.
Yeah, asking for help is actually one of the hardest things for folks to do, especially if they've asked for help in the past and they've
Correct.
experienced the inability of the person on the other line, the other
Yeah.
side of the line to help. I
Yeah.
know my daughter has called one of those like suicide lines, and the
Yeah.
person was incapable of helping her. So it
Yeah.
completely turned her off from
Yeah.
calling. I've called friends and they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. So
Yeah.
um I think that goes back to a societal responsibility to take care of each other. And I know that's not what we're talking about,
Yeah.
but as a society, we don't know how to be uncomfortable, and we don't know how to help others, because even helping somebody is uncomfortable. Because what
Yeah,
if
it
you
is.
fail?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it goes back. I think it all ties into that, being uncomfortable and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I don't know
And
if you
in
think the same
America,
thing.
but in America, you've got numbers of there's an app I've got where it's all over the world, and you can just put something in it, and somebody's going to contact you, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
veteran.
we
So
have
you know,
so many options, and that's why I tell
oh,
people if one option doesn't work, try another one.
try another one. And you see, when an option doesn't work, it's easy to go backwards. But then what you've done is you've gone, oh, this is so uncomfortable. I'm now going to opt out. And so I find myself saying to myself and others a lot, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. If you choose to sit down, do it, but then get up and dust off. And
Right.
you know, when I was training for in South Africa, there's a thing called Comrades Ultra Marathon, which is 84 kilometers, and it's either one year is uphill and the other year is downhill. And I did the uphill in 1990. And when I had a mate of mine who was training me for that, and when he trained me, he said, look, I'm going to make a deal with you that I'm not going to tolerate your excuses to stop. And I said to him, I'm going to be fine. I mean, I want to do this. And he said, because he said, you're going to be hitting constant zones of discomfort. And at that point in time, a part of you is going to want to opt out because it's just uncomfortable. And he was right. And so I realized the value of somebody keeping us in discomfort. And when I say that, I don't mean abusive ways. I mean, even just being present to another person and encouraging them to talk, encouraging them just to let's look at what we can do. I'm here, pick up a phone, I'll phone you, and then slowly build on that. So, what we're doing is we're staying with someone and we are not inviting them to just go into that cold, dark place and die. We are a light and a force and an energy that walks with them and through that zone of discomfort. So
Right.
there's all these things that I think we need to be doing. I don't think you're right. I think most people are very discomfort averse. If it's cold, we dress warmly. If we're hungry, it's uncomfortable. If we're tired, we just want to sleep. Well, having kids, I had croupy kids and colicky kids, and for many years I averaged, 3 hours sleep a night. That's uncomfortable, but do you back off because it's uncomfortable? Or do you step in? Everything about life, aging is uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable because I can't run the distances I used to. I used to run. I'm having to deal with aches and pains. So from the day we are born till the day we are die, we need to deal with discomfort. And discomfort is the time when I always say our ancestors talk to us and they initiate us into change and wisdom. So yeah, I think discomfort is a very powerful thing when used appropriately in creating healing.
I like that a lot. It makes a lot of sense, and I like it when people push me through discomfort. I mean, I get snappy with them.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
I don't
cool.
I don't want to do it. I'm the biggest person that says I'm not going to do it as I'm doing it.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I like to feel like I have some control over,
yeah.
what's going on. But I
What I'd
do.
say to you is, if I was working with you and you're going, oh, I just don't want to shower, I go, no, I don't want to do cold water. I go, I tell you what, I'm a lot older than you, so let's look at how are we going to work this one together now. And so what I want you to do is I want you to message me and tell me when you do it. And even if you don't do it, tell me so we can look at what's got in the way. So it's a collaborative endeavor between us to keep you in that space of discomfort and to encourage you to find the resources to go over yourself.
And that's why it's so important to find your tribe, not to
Yeah,
go it alone, and
yeah,
find your support system, even if it's with a therapist and a friend and a
correct,
peer support and whatever
correct.
other resources you can find.
Yeah,
Because it's hard to go through things alone.
that's very, very, and I think that aloneness and that isolation and that disconnection and dislocation from tribe for so many veterans is just so profound. And then at the same time, you're trying to navigate your way through your VA and your benefits and everything around that, and you get lost. And many years ago, when I was thinking of all the different things that we carry out of operations, first there's a post-traumatic stress disorder, and I've always said I don't like the word disorder because if you're disordered, where do you go from there? So the post-traumatic stress, much better. Then I talked to somebody and we talked about combat stress. And I thought, well, that's a good one because, yeah, I think a lot of people have combat stress. And then I created an acronym, PTTP, post-traumatic, post, post-transitioning stress, post-transitioning challenges, PTC, something like that. Post-military transitioning challenges, PMTC, because even my own acronyms get the best of me. Because if you think about it, you're moving out of your tribe, and how you're moving could be complex. Your identity, loss of tribe, loss of self, grief, you throw that all together, dump that all in civilian life, getting lost in between and displaced in the middle. So now what's going to happen? It's stressful. If you're stressed, you're going to start becoming anxious, kick up enough stress and anxiety, you're going to become depressed, then you may not even want to live. Now, do we call that PTSD, or is that post-military transitioning challenge with symptomatology about getting lost in the journey? You see, so the one is a diagnostic term, the other one says, hey, we've got a challenge here. It's understandable that you're feeling lost, and it's understandable that it is stressful and that maybe your mood is impacting, but this is a great challenge. Let's look at what we can do. So there are those situations where maybe we can normalize and reframe and redefine, and we can create tools and strategies to reconnect and refine who you are. So I don't know if my PMTC is ever going to make its way into a diagnostic manual, but I think there's something quite valid about post-military transitioning challenges as a discrete cluster
That's
of symptomatology.
uh, oddly enough, that is what I call the struggle is real. I call it the struggle, and
Mm,
that's what I kind of based my training around, was that going from an old normal to a new normal, what happens
yeah.
in the middle there, and it's
Mm,
messy and it's
mm,
hard. and we don't know how to do it. Nobody tells us when we're transitioning out of the military how to deal with that messy part of the journey. And if you don't know, when you're trained to know how to do things, like to not even have to think, and you know your job when you're in the military, to be thrown into a situation where you don't have the tools, the knowledge, and the skill set to understand that terrain, like that is a shock to anybody. And then add that on that you're a military member and you're used to knowing instantaneously how to do something. So that's why I call it the struggle. And my class is called The Struggle is Real, because it is. And I applaud anybody that has made it through. I got my shirt on today. It says been there, done that. Got the t-shirt and it says The Struggle is Real, military transition. So
I love that.
because it, to me, now that I'm on the other side, for the most part, like I don't think I'll ever be done transitioning completely, because I'm always growing as a person. But now that I'm on the other side of the true ugliness that I was in post transition, I feel like I deserve a t-shirt for that.
I agree. I agree with you. And I think also, because that vision is so powerful for you and it's reflected in the work you do, it needs more and more people bringing back the learning and the wisdom and the tools that are relevant into this journey. So increasingly there are guys like you, men and women who are gathering this wisdom and offering diverse ways of climbing up this mountain into recovering who you are and finding a life of purpose. I just think it's awesome. When I see the number of people that I've talked to in America, like yourself, and others who are doing an extraordinary job of calling people back to themselves and a wonderful life, using all sorts of diverse modalities, from nature, animal therapy, um, going into different kinds of therapeutic environments, body-based modalities. um, they are helping people, they're guiding people back. And these are often not just psychologists, but these are veterans who've stood up and they want to make a difference because they've got knowledge on the ground. It's not abstracted academic knowledge, it's the wisdom on the ground informed by a very clear work and time spent understanding territory and what people need. Now we need more people doing this. So we need more people wearing those t-shirts.
I agree. I love my shirt.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it came out of a conversation over a couple of different networking events.
Yeah.
Just having conversations with people, and I get a little nutty when I talk to folks. I was like, man, this is a struggle. I'm like,
Yeah.
the struggle is real. And then like we start talking about things, and I'm like, I feel like people should have t-shirts. So it just kind of came out of that. And that's a lot of how things transpire in the veteran community. You network, you get to know people, you find commonalities, and you say, well, you know what, if this worked for me and you, then it'll probably, maybe help somebody else. And I think that connection and that networking piece and being open to other people's journeys and understanding what they went through, and taking what you can from it. And that's why I do the Transition Tales podcast too, is I want to create that connection so people don't feel so alone. I want to share as many of those post-transition stories as I possibly can. Um, and I felt alone. So just so people don't feel alone, is one of my biggest things.
Yeah, and I think also we need more of the podcasts where people are starting to talk about those more subtle aspects of transitioning and being lost, the shame, the grief, identity. So that, and they're not the superheroes. They're just the ordinary men and
Oh
women on the
yeah.
ground. So, so people out there, like you said to me just now, you said, geez, I didn't know that so many people felt the same way about not being good enough. Well, when others out there go, geez, you mean there's lots of people and it's not just me? The minute you go there, you take shame away. You start to heal shame, because shame's a killer.
Oh goodness gracious, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's not nice.
And I'm a big, Brene Brown, I earlier, I'm a big follower of hers. And so I've read a
Yeah.
lot about her shame, the shame theory that kind of ties in with her work.
Mm, mm,
And, I tell people when people start to say things to me to kind of cause me to feel ashamed, I'm like,
mm,
stop shaming me. I was like, this is not
mm,
okay. But
mm.
you have to be able to recognize when those things are being said to you and you're feeling towards it. Um,
Absolutely.
because it's not just about, oh, ignoring what other people are saying. It's about
Yeah.
standing up for yourself and setting those boundaries and
Yeah.
saying, hey, you don't get to talk to me like this, you know,
Correct.
and shame is everywhere, not just in the military and veteran community.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's a big problem.
Yeah, look, it's a big problem. And I think often a good metaphor for me was imagine your backpack. You need to look at what's in it because, like on any operation, if you're carrying too much weight, you're ineffective. And I think sometimes what we leave in the transitioning process, we're just carrying a backpack of good stuff and crazy stuff. And so it's about looking in that backpack and deciding what are we going to take out. And some of the things is just a quick reframe where you go, well, so you're not the only person who doesn't feel good enough. Wow. And then I had somebody say to me many years ago, which really helped me. It was a senior officer in the Rhodesian Army. And he said, anybody who put foot on the ground has deserved the right to call themselves a veteran. It doesn't matter what you did because that you have no control over. But the willingness to put your foot on the ground and enter the military, you're a veteran. And I remember this part of me just going, just a long breath out. And so, when people hear these stories and they realize that they in tribe because so many people are experiencing it and we reframe it, there's rapid healing often. Because there's simple things we can just let go. There's a couple of rocks we can just go, yep, let's reframe this and leave this one alone. Guilt. Guilt's dead end. You know, rather figure out what you learned from that is when we start to allocate self-blame. So there's weights that we piling stuff into our backpack. We need to look at that.
Yeah.
So a very simple one is just figure out those rocks that don't demand too many years of therapy or medication. Look at them, have a conversation with them, and then wish them goodbye.
Yeah.
You
Throw them in the
know.
proverbial lake. Go skip some rocks.
Mm. I mean, I think it's about often that some of the challenges I've seen with the blokes is because they're so triggered so easily in their relationships or when they come. Actually, I wouldn't even say it's with guys. It's men and women when they come back. When there's pressures and kids and noisy kids and young kids, it's very easy to upregulate, and you can literally almost bring the war back home. So that whereas you were in an operational kind of tempo and hypervigilance with the enemy, you bring that back and they become you within the home, trying to walk on eggshells around you. And I remember
Right.
saying to one person once, I said, when you were in Iraq and people were shouting at you and swearing, did you react? And they went, no, absolutely not. So then I went, so how come you're doing that when your wife is upset with you? And they went, So I said, okay, so we acknowledge that you've got the wiring for self control. So let's look at how we communicate through that in a different way. So even the learning to listen, the seeking to understand first without getting triggered or needing to justify, isn't that a zone of discomfort because you want to just justify yourself?
Oh yeah.
It's about right and wrong and power and control. Well, what happens when we just breathe? That all it is words. Words are never going to kill you. If your partner is a bit unhappy at the moment, well, it doesn't mean he or she is right or wrong, but you can learn to listen and ask reflective questions. Tell me more. And by opening space, there's simple tools, techniques, communication techniques where we don't have to get into this lock, push, and pull type stuff. Because if you did it in the military, everything about operational functionality is not a loss of control. Everything is controlled. Everything is about being able to maintain clarity in high stressful situations and behave appropriately. So the wiring's there. We need to bring it back and look at what's getting in the way. And so I guess probably I've learned that in working with veterans, instead of using psychobabble, it's about let's use the language, the tools, and the wisdom from the territory that they go, oh, I get that. Oh, yeah, I understand that. Oh, I can see why pull throughs are important. I
Yeah,
can see why I
yeah.
need to go from my ambush zone to my OP.
Yeah, I like that. So when I was reading Which Way is Your Warrior Facing, I liked all the
Yeah,
military terminology. I wasn't a combat person, but I was around them, and
yeah,
I was already very into military. Like, I watched military movies and all this stuff. Like, I'm a patriot, right?
yeah,
So I really dig that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
going back to what you were talking about when you bring it home, I wonder if there's some type of comfort where you know those people are always going to love you and be there for you, and they're not going to turn on you. um if that's why we kind of lose that sense of that, why we lose that control, because we it's just so built up in us. I wonder if
Yeah.
that has something to do with it, because I know for my children, um they're well behaved, very,
Mm,
from a small age they've always been well
mm,
behaved in public,
mm,
but when they
yeah,
get home, man, they're a mess. And that's kind of how I
mm,
justified it, is okay, they held on to all their emotions all
mm,
this time at this birthday party, being well behaved, and then they come home and they just release it all on me
mm.
because they know I'm going to love them. Now, is it okay? No. And I think
So,
that's where we have to
yeah,
understand why we are doing
yeah,
what we're doing. Like you said, we know we have the skills. We need to figure out why we're not leaning into those skills, to be
yeah.
able to
What's getting in the
change.
way? Yeah. And you know, I'm not sure that any of our relationships are unconditional,
Oh,
except if it's spiritual. And so, you know, I often think that you've got so many brownie points in any relationship. And when you blow those brownie points, all hell's going to break loose because people are going to say, you know what? I love you, but I've had enough. Get some help or get out.
oh yeah, I
Um,
agree that it's not unconditional, but I think
ooh,
sometimes we believe that, like, oh, they're
oh,
gonna love
yeah.
me no matter what.
Oh, yeah. Bad formula. And I think part of what I do with the people I work with is that I explain, hey, listen, you know, you've got so many brownie points. And at the point you cross that line, I often say to them, you're going to get double tapped. And when that, you know, it's a bang bang and right here. And I go, you don't want to go there. So we need to look at what choices you make at that point. Nothing is unconditional. I'll explain to them, you know. It's that sense of entitlement that you've come back and you can let rip and vomit and bring all your unprocessed stuff and dump it in your family is your first mistake. You don't. You need to take ownership of that, and let's look at what you can do and what we need to be able to put in place to help you get there. So it's
I
not
mean, even if you got a raw deal in the military, whether it was your combat experience or whatever, you don't get to be a victim. Like, you got to
yeah,
put on your big boy or big girl panties
yeah,
and own your
mm,
journey in life. Because I
mm,
know a lot of people, I was just talking to somebody else about this, sometimes
mm,
their trauma from the military had nothing to do with combat. It had to do
yeah,
with supervision and them, taking advantage of their power over you, or
mm,
sexual
mm-hmm,
harassment or sexual assault.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um so, and that's another thing that I'm trying to normalize, is that not all trauma comes from combat. It's like there's this list of, oh, combat trauma matters, sexual assault matters, and then everything else just kind of, oh, that's not trauma. And that's not how that works.
yeah.
um
No, like
so
being
yeah.
bullied constantly. And you know, I've read a number of autobiographies by women, whether they were you know, helicopter pilots, fighter jet pilots, or their times in the military and the sexual discrimination that was directed at them. And I mean, that is no more or less than combat trauma. Um, and I think it's with high levels of trauma, as we know, the brain is just shutting down constantly. Now, our ability to self-control and self-regulate is extremely difficult, and I think we need to be respectful of that because it's such a shutdown on the front of the brain where the thinking and the planning are possible. So what I call the OP is just you're stuck in your ambush zone 24/7. Now, the biggest thing is not to tell people you need to find self-control because you're talking to this part and that part's not working. It's let's look at what help you can get. And sometimes it's about spending some time in a unit, in a clinic, in a hospital, whether you're talking to a doctor about medication, where you contacting appropriate psychologists and health professionals to support you. So I'm very careful about not trying to set parameters around getting people to maintain self-control and self-reflection when in fact they are on such shutdown that they've completely lost perspective of their territory. So
And
we
I
have
think
to be
that's a
very
mistake a
attuned.
lot of people make is they're like, well, I don't understand why you can't get yourself under control. And like you said, that part of the brain,
Yeah.
it's not functioning properly or not functioning at all. So we have to
Well, it's
get
gone.
them, yeah. And so we get the VA gets picked on here for how they over medicate us, right?
Yeah.
But I think a
Yeah.
lot of their reasoning behind medication is to get us to a point where we can start thinking clearly, so we can
Yeah.
start working on things. I don't think it's meant to numb us, right? Like, oh, we're just going
No.
to throw medication on you and not help you. Being
Mm.
that our VA is overrun, it's hard to get the help you need, but still,
Correct. Yeah.
I want to be able to function as an individual. So if that requires me to take some medication for a little while, then
Yeah.
so be it. I want to be a good mom. Like that's one of my
Yeah.
biggest things.
Absolutely. So there's a place. There certainly is a place for those forms of management. I think part of what I think is that I think the tools we use in working with individuals are pretty thin on the ground. So, when we talk about the front of your brain being completely shut off, yet you walk into therapy and we're looking at what are your dysfunctional thoughts, what are your catastrophizing thoughts. Let's look at some positive thoughts. Well, front door's closed if you hadn't figured it. You're not going to get in there. So I think we need to look at a number of the more brain neuroscience body-based modalities that are more bottom up. So things like, whether you're using EMDR or the breath work, mindful meditation. One of my most wonderful characters, a guy, John McCaskill in Veterans Path, pushing mindfulness. Now, mindfulness does have a certain cognitive component because there is a thinking process in that, but just an attunement, sitting and breathing and having a glass of cold water and listening to the sounds around you and the feelings in your body, you're slowly bringing down the back of the brain. So I think we need to find modalities. It's like my challenge as a therapist was my clinical master's training was very psychodynamic and psychoanalytic with a little bit of CBT and very little about the brain. And I realized that after many years of working with veterans, because I'm so relationship based, the quality of relationship and what I was beginning to learn to represent as a veteran was creating a lot of healing, but I wasn't getting to stuff. And I realized that my tools were simply not enough. I didn't stand in a position where I went, well, these are my evidence based tools and I will use it for everything. There's a level of a lack of humility that concerns me in that when we think that what we've got is enough. And so for me, it was a constant exploration to find ways to work to get better in a respectful way, which didn't have to freak or stress people out by stretching them into change. So I think our challenge for all of us who are working with veterans is that it's the same as the principles of warfare. You need to look at the tools you've got. You need to assess those tools in relationship to the people you are working with and the territories they come from. And you need to look quite critically as to whether you need to supplement them with more understanding and more training. And I do believe that the neuroscience, the brain and the body modalities, pick up Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps a Score. Go there and see what is available. I think that should be a core text for anyone working with people who carry trauma because it makes us think beyond the core tools we get when we train. It's like you get your driver's license and you're just taught enough to make you safe. But then you need to learn more that instinctual stuff as you drive. We don't just settle for our initial learning, we grow over time. Well, why shouldn't we do that as professionals working with veterans and current serving?
Yeah,
Because we certainly do. We don't come out of university with enough, I can tell you that.
no, not at all. I'm working on my PhD right now in
Yeah,
psychology, and I'm going through this is the first time I've ever taken psych classes. How they accepted
yeah,
me into this program, I don't know, but I'm grateful.
yeah,
But I'm taking all these psych classes, and it's like they're always like, well, this one's better than this one according to these people. And I love being that when
Yeah.
I answer questions, I answer them differently than everybody else in the class. And I'm just like, why can't we all just get along and we figure out what aspect of psychology works for this individual? Why does
Yeah.
it have to be, oh, I'm a psychoanalyst, so I
Yeah.
only do psychoanalysis? Or, I'm a positive
Yeah.
psychology person, so I can
Yeah.
only use this, or
Yeah.
humanistic, or,
Yeah.
oh, we can't do neuroscience because that's not psychology.
Yeah.
I think that we are such dynamic creatures that we will never completely understand ourselves, number
No.
one. And number two, if all we do is box things up and only pick one box, we're never going to get anywhere
No.
as far as healing and being the best human beings that we possibly can be.
Yeah.
So I love being that voice of reason in my classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and I've just you can't learn enough about us.
Well, I heard a statement which is it went, if we think we know what the problem is, and if we think we know what they need, we've made our first mistake. Because the brain is simply far too complex to simplify it down to a simple diagnosis and management. X equals Y.
Yeah, because
I think
certain
so.
things don't work for me. Because I go to therapy all the time, and they try
Yeah.
to give me stuff every time I get a new therapist. Because it happens a lot in the veteran
Yeah.
community. Every time I get a new therapist, they want to try. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. Like, I've already
Yeah.
done that, and they're like, but no, this is what we do for people in your situation. I'm like, I said, unfortunately, my brain is too smart for that, and my brain wants to be away from discomfort. So I have great problem solving abilities, and it'll not do it. It will find a way around it, and having to explain that to a therapist, like, some of them don't like it very much, and I lose them as therapists, which is probably best for me. Um,
Yeah, look, I think it is. I think I do encourage people going into any form of therapy or counseling to be quite selective. I do say things like to psychologists, counselors, etc. I go, well, you need to earn the right. You need to build trust, and you need to understand their territory before you come waltzing in with your so-called modalities. Again, it comes back to the same thing that, as you said, somebody may be a psychoanalyst, somebody may be a cognitive behavioral therapist, somebody may be positive psychology. So we've got our territory, and everybody is going to get squished into that territory. Well, there's a level of self-absorbed omnipotence in that concerns me, because what is the core thing that veterans bring is understanding that we need to constantly adjust our tools to the demands of the territory. Imagine if there was one way of operating and we took that to urban guerrilla warfare, or we took it into Iraq or Afghanistan or Borneo or whatever. It was one way. And we know that when protocols are formulated from on top without common knowledge on the ground, some terrible things happen.
yes.
So yet as professionals, we come in with our two little tools and we are going to wrench people into our little tools. It's look, I just end up shaking my head. I think it's a wakey call that as professionals at any level working with veterans, we need to listen more, we need to learn more, and we need to find a little bit more humility about what we think are our one or two little spanners that we apply to everyone because it works. Not always. And I think it's great when people like you go, look, I've done that and it doesn't work for me.
They love when I tell them, I'm like, yeah, I teach that. We just call it something different. Because we taught, they teach us resilient skills in the military, and I taught those
So they do.
courses, and I
Yeah.
didn't just teach the words that were in the course. I went and looked at all the research for it, so I
Yeah.
understood it, and I was able to put it into analogies and examples, and I tried it out myself, and all these different things, because I don't ever want to teach something to somebody that I've never tried myself and that I can't explain past the words that are handed to me. And that's just
Mm.
me and how I feel about taking care of my community and those around me. Excuse me.
Yeah, look, and I think that I guess my biggest, what over the years of writing and formulating how I was working with the people I was sitting with, is I realized that I'd come across a way of, as I said, using the awareness, the understanding, the map, the territories of operational stuff and military stuff, and grounding everything in that. And I think my mission has always been, I think there's something of value in that. I'm not telling you to change the modalities you use. I'm saying there are different ways to couch your communication where men and women go, oh yeah, a pull through, that makes complete sense. So I'm stuck in my ambush zone. And if we can do that, and that I guess is my biggest mission and one of service, is that I don't think I invented this. It's always been there. And I know there are other organizations where we're always talking about the same thing anyway. I just happen to constellate it together and write about it. But if we just started doing that, so first learn the language of the people you are sitting with rather than expecting them to learn your language with the tools you bring.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, and I love how you use acronyms too. That's a big thing
Yeah.
for us also
It
here
is.
in the States with the military. And I would come up with acronyms too. I did our big marketing campaign piece for the preservation of the force and family program for the
Yeah.
peer-to-peer program.
Yeah.
And I came up with an acronym for that. And and they're like, but they hate acronyms. I said, yes and no. I said, they will eat this up. And
Yeah.
number two, it gives the peer supporters
Mm.
the tool that they can remember when they're telling people about the program. We do
Correct.
this, and this because it's in an
Yeah.
acronym. They're not
Correct.
pulling for words. And
Yeah.
that's the whole point of military having acronym is it helps us repetition and remember and, organize and routine. So, yeah, I love acronyms. I think they're
You
so
see,
fun.
also we're talking a shared language. And I think the whole thing, neuroscience, what it showed was we can use a number of different modalities, but the most important thing is the quality of relationship. That is where real healing happens. If you don't have a relationship, what you're doing is you're like a monkey using a tool, without any connection. And it always concerns me where we have professionals working with individuals and there's actually no relationship happening. It's more a technical process. Now, I do believe that until we form this strong relationship, this therapeutic alliance of trust, care, and respect and common knowledge, anything we're going to use will have impact, but the real healing is from the process of connection. So I always feel it's very important. I always hope that in the training people go through, that the emphasis has not ever been on developing that relationship, the ability to be present to, and not just a tool that you taught and ground into for all these years. So relationship is critical. It is critical. And I'm very grateful for my training that I might have been a bit shortchanged on a couple of modalities in the brain, but that the relationship for me was always something that was really powerful. And it's not a friendship, it's a professional relationship, but it's one of shared and mutual respect, care, and trust. And we see this going wrong, where I had a person say to me once, I went to see us. I said, have you seen somebody before? And they went, yep, yeah, I went to see someone. I said, what happened? I walked into the room and I sat down, clearly facing the doorway. The therapist said, I'm sorry, that's my chair. You need to sit there. He said, I'm sitting here. Didn't give it, I'm sitting here. The therapist said, nope, I'm sorry, that's my chair. It's like,
Not even
that's not,
not even asking why that was important to the
no why.
person. Yeah.
No why, because clearly that wasn't even within the mind frame of the individual supposed to be supporting, because their territory was so linear that they couldn't actually see beyond it. The person got up and walked out, and that was it. That's a breach of trust. So again, the relationship, and probably the word I would use is attunement. I don't think there's enough attunement. I think we all need to work on an attunement and take time to learn that attunement while we are working with veterans or current serving, or before we commit to trying to work in those territories. And look, attunement for anyone, but I mean, today we're really talking about working with veterans. Without attunement, you're shortchanged.
Yeah.
And you're shortchanging the individual who really is placing trust, and it's a betrayal of trust.
And what is the trickle down effect of that? They may never seek help again, or
No,
you know what I mean? Like what we have to understand our responsibility in everything, like how we speak to others, how we treat others just as individuals, and
Yeah.
what the ramifications are of that. I know for me, my favorite therapists that I've had are been the ones that adjust to me. Like my most favorite recently, she understood I'm a little weird. I like to tell stories and I'm a nerd. And I have to I have to come up with my own solutions. They may be based on something, but it has to be kind of like my own solution that works for me. And so she learned to help me navigate taking those tools and bending them to what works best for me. And also she enjoyed my stories. I mean, she could have easily been one of those people that just like, but she actually like got into my stories when I would tell her, because I think she realized that there was something of value in me sharing. you know I'm almost like a comedian when I do it. So she really got into it. But I rarely find that in therapists. So
Yeah. So you see, I think you put it really well. She adjusts to you. Now, so often when I look at various practices and I look at the websites and then I can see written that this practice uses this approach. It's like, yeah, okay. And I can feel the hair standing up on the back of why one approach. So that
and what
means,
what am I going to know about that as a client? Do I really
oh,
care?
well, it means that when you go into that approach, into that practice, you are having to adjust to the demands of that practice. You have to adjust because that's what you're going to get. And the sense of pride and this is what we use. What if we rather step back and went, you know what? What we offer is an ability to connect and look at what is going to be meaningful for you and what you need on this journey, on which on the way there will be a number of tools and modalities that we can look at and find those that work for you, rather than this arrogance that our pride of our one or two little modalities that flash across our websites were like a flag. It just does it really does concern me, and I would say to veterans out there, you do not need to adjust to the person sitting opposite you. They need to adjust to you, and if that can't be done, then there's a problem in the therapeutic alliance and the attunement and the level of trust and care that can be built up in that environment. And I know that what I'm saying is quite hard hitting, but the fact that we have 22 people a day killing themselves means two things. The first is that we are part of the solution and we are also part of the problem. And the part of us that is part of the problem, we need to self reflect, not the people that are coming to us with trust for help. We need to self reflect on what we are doing and where the tools we use, the modalities, and who we are, and bring into that situation what needs to change. That is our sacred mission.
I,
So yeah, I'm a bit tough on that one, I must admit.
no, I agree with you. So I'm more of the I agree with you, as providers need to do that, but and I always go back to human beings as well. Suicide is not just a mental health issue, it's a societal issue.
Yeah.
So, me as an individual, I need to make sure that I'm not a part of the problem as well when I'm helping others or when I'm providing peer support, or, when I'm on the other end of that person that's hurting. Um, I it it is so important to we've gotten to this place. I don't know if it's like that in Australia, but here in the States where we're just like, well, it's nobody's fault that somebody killed themselves. And I'm like, do we, I mean, I don't think we need to place blame, but let's look at what led up to it and see if we can be better as human beings at taking care of each other and being connected. And I know that's crazy that I'm trying to change the world, but if I just change one person, then I can impact maybe another person and prevent one suicide. I don't know. But it being in that environment, when I was a contractor,
Mm.
of that's all that was like, it was like forced into us as contractors that it's not our fault if somebody in our unit kills themselves. We've done the best. You will always do the best that you can do. And I'm like, I don't know if I quite agree with that. And if we're constantly promoting that to the service members, to the veterans, to the mental health folks, to the program managers for resilience and suicide prevention, that there's not much more we can do, and it's just they're broken.
Mm, mm,
That really
mm,
sat really
mm,
wrong with me,
mm,
and I was always trying to
mm.
find something more that we could do, because I always believe there is something more that we can do.
Look, I think the wake up call and the sense of ownership and mission for those of us working with veterans is to never become complacent about who we are and what we do and what we use. I think if we take the operational kind of rules and protocols that in our work with veterans, we need to constantly assess who we are and the modalities we use and the territory that they work in and don't work in. If there's a constant process of self reflection and improvement and gathering more tools to be able to use in diverse and different presentations and territories, then we are really doing the best we can to be a part of the solution. And in that process, sometimes we may lose people. But if we can self reflect, if we can step back from our, our complacency that the tool we've got works for everything, then we know we've done the best we can in this process. And so I think within the military population, as I've said, we need to be very self reflective and self critical and make sure that we are ready to be the best of who we are when we work with the men and women that we sit with. And we also need to be guided by the feedback they give us. And I will always say to people, guys, if I say or do anything that triggers you or that you think is not okay, you need to let me know. And I will hold that and we will look at it. So, what we are doing is we are walking shoulder to shoulder, and I am open and ready for the feedback when they go, hey, Barry, and I've tried stuff out on guys and they go, Barry, that stuff I'm not doing. It doesn't work for me. Now, I can do two things at that point. I can go, well, this approach, all the research shows it works and we need to stay with it. And then I define and label the stuff as resistance. Oh, maybe, yeah. But when you do that, you take somebody's power away. Or what I can do is go, well, okay, I hear that. Let's look at some other stuff and let's look at what you're willing to do. So we move together. It's a dance. So I
Do you
think when we do, yeah, carry on.
do you think that the inability for many to not reflect has to do with that wanting to not be uncomfortable that we talked about earlier? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to know that I'm a part of the problem.
Oh, yeah. Because, a lot of my training was looking at the transference and countertransference and how you feel and take ownership of what you're feeling sitting opposite someone. But if you spend 5 or 6 years at university and you know nothing about transference, countertransference, or projection, it's like you're not even going to know what's in your body and what to do with it. And now you base a story and a behavior around that. And I don't understand why in training we're forgetting about in this interchange with another human being, there are things that come up in our bodies that is not just about them, but about who we are. And that self reflective capacity to be able to feel it. I don't know why we ignore that stuff.
That's just, yeah,
So, oh,
crazy.
yeah, if you don't know it, it's easy to throw a projection out at the person you're sitting.
Oh,
It
I
really
used to be amazing at it until I understood that I was doing it.
is. Yeah, making the other person wrong, eh? It's a very simple way. Yeah, it's you wrong. Yeah, it's like my tool works and you just defensive. It's so
Oh,
simple, isn't it? If only
it,
healing was that easy. Eh?
I know. I wish it was. I have so many self-help books, and I read
Yeah,
them, and I, apply the knowledge or the skills or whatever the case may
yeah,
be. And it's just like, why isn't my life like rainbows and sunshine all the time? I've done this for so long, but I've now come to the point where everything is a journey. I'm not looking at a destination anymore. I'm looking at where I'm at right now and how I can be the best me tomorrow, you
yeah.
know.
And
And
I have the same thing both personally And even professionally, I'm on a journey, and on this journey, I'm trying to get better at who I am all the time. Every time, I've always said that in the 18 years I've sat with veterans, as a result of them, I've become a better human being, a better psychologist, a better parent, and a better husband. And I thank them for that. The only difference is that they are not there for me, I am there for their journey. But in that capacity to self reflect and truly listen, I am changed and transformed by the stories that these individuals have shared with me from the depths of who they are. And that in that there's profound learning that each time round, I get better. I think I get better, or I try to be better at what I do. And so that sense of humility combined with introspective thinking and looking at it from a very holistic, not from a, if we go into operations looking like that, what do we talk about in operations? We talk about situational awareness, 360. But as professionals, if we're coming in with an arc of fire that's like this, then all that concerns and works for us is what's going on in this little arc of fire. But the people we're sitting with, it's a 360-degree vision. We need to be able to think and feel and work with 360 degrees.
I think
And
that
so,
really applies in a professional setting too, where
oh
we
yeah,
tell people not to have personal issues and things like that. We can't just say, okay, I'm at work, so I'm only going to focus on, 10% of this
yeah,
view, because
yeah,
the other 60% that's actually consuming me on the inside, it doesn't exist in this location. It just doesn't quite work that way. And the same thing with, management and supervision. We have to really see everything that's going on, or we're not going to
yeah.
be able to be effective.
Correct. So maybe part of our learning as people working with the military population is that we move from our very narrow field of vision, if that's what it is, and we broaden it and we take the time to look at what that broadening means. And I guess, as I've said to you, my mission is, well, let's look at the languaging of how we communicate with veterans. Let's look at using terminology and tools and names that it just resonates. I don't talk to people about their frontal cortex. I talk to people about let's get into your OP. As I said to you, I talk to people about ADs and pull throughs and runaway guns, and let's stop a runaway gun. They go for it because it makes sense, because they can reflect it back on their training that kept them alive.
So you have experience as a veteran, so that probably comes a little bit more natural to you. So how would
Yeah.
somebody that has never served, like how do they make that adjustment? Do you have any suggestions?
Look, I think that first little book I wrote, which was your Claymore facing. That was it's about quarter of an inch thick. You can put in your back pocket, and that was really not just for veterans to give them to map out, because if your territory is not mapped and your compass is not orientated, you're going to have an interesting journey. And so that was meant for veterans to go, that makes sense. But it was also something for professionals to use. So the same, all those things are in the Warrior book, which is a free PDF. And I I will often say to people, look, just read it. That's all. Take from it what you want. But even if you just come out with an understanding about changing neuroscience into operational terminology, talking to people about pull throughs, understanding why the guilt that people, they're not feeling good enough. So your understanding of this human being sitting in front of you is now more 360 rather than just clinical.
Right.
um, that's the way that that's my contribution, is by offering something that I hope can make us as counselors, etc., better, and also that can give those working in the territories, the veterans that are current serving, an idea of, okay, now I understand the territory I'm going through. Because often people don't even know that they're haunted by something, they're not good enough. It's often so deeply intertwined and intermixed with things I don't even know it's there.
Yeah. And I think the return on investment for somebody, uh, especially a professional, like
Yeah,
your book is free.
yeah, it is.
The
Yeah,
only thing they're investing is a little bit of their time to better
yeah,
understand, or potentially better understand, their clients and be able to help them, not by changing necessarily their tactics,
Yeah.
but like how they describe them, right? And like I
Yeah.
said, the return on investment, like it's not a huge read. Like I think I read the first a third of it in like maybe 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I really like dove deep into it and took notes
Yeah.
and stuff. So um, I don't think that's a lot to ask of anybody if they want to really serve
Mm.
the military and veteran community.
Yeah, look, I'd like to see it getting out there more. I mean, I'm trying to, at the moment, when I put it up a long time ago, it's you have to sign on. And I said to my wife, in fact, we're going to look at it over the next 2 weeks. I said, somebody has to come in, they got to give their email addresses. So, I'm collecting a list. I said, I don't want that. I don't want anything out of it. And so she said that we can get in there and take away all of that. And so somebody can just go click and download the book. I mean, people are free to contact me on LinkedIn. Um, and I'm always happy to give what I've got, and share what I have. Um,
That's
and
one of
so
the
there
things
are,
I love about you, because you're looking for an opportunity to take down another barrier to make sure
yeah,
that this information is getting out there, because you truly care about the community and individuals and how we are as as a human race. Like you want to make everything better, and I think that's amazing.
yeah. Well, LinkedIn, I've often said that LinkedIn is often a networking thing for people to get traction on the vision and the businesses they want. Well, I've been very gifted in that. I work in a school during the day, and I work for my veteran counseling services after hours. And so financially, I don't have to develop anything that I don't want to. I get enough. And so I've had this beautiful experience of LinkedIn is just a process of service and connection. It's not a process of networking. I don't need anything out of it. What I get out of it is the joy of having talked to and met folk like you and many others, and these extraordinary relationships that I've developed. And so I'm in a great process where I enjoy the gifts of just being able to serve in whatever way I can and put in something. And that book may not fit somebody. That one's a bit more personal because when I wrote it, it was also something that, I wanted to give to my kids. And so it's got a lot of me when I did some crazy stuff like trying to cycle across the desert in Israel, or the marathons I've run and the lessons from it. So there's a lot of me in that book, and probably I may turn that into a final book with a lot more of a structured process on transitioning, but I'll take out the personal stuff.
I like the
Um,
personal stuff though, because it creates
so,
that connection that we so desperately need. And it
hmm,
also gives me a break in, like, because sometimes people are
okay,
reading like technical stuff, right?
yeah,
And it gives
yeah,
like that little break of, oh, look at this cool little picture, or what a great
okay,
antidote this is.
yeah,
That's me personally, though. I like that
yeah,
stuff. I'm not sure how anybody else would feel, but I like
yeah,
creating connection and experience those connections. And, you reached out to me over LinkedIn.
mm,
So that to me shows that, what you're saying, it's true. Like you're like, hey, I would love to be on your podcast, or what else can I do to help, the
yeah,
military community through you. Um, and that's a lot of what I try to do on LinkedIn as well. And I think that's why we have really found a commonality in that.
yeah,
We don't do the same thing. We do things differently, different
yeah,
industries and stuff.
yeah.
I'm going to end up in your industry one day.
You will.
Yeah, but we have that commonality of caring about our community and
Yeah,
wanting to serve others without getting anything but the feel. Could you get something out of it? You get the feel good hormones out of it.
yeah,
Um, but without getting anything monetarily out of it. I think, to me, I get more out of that than I would if somebody actually paid me
mm,
to be a coach. You know what I mean? Like I
yeah.
love doing it for free, and I know that sounds insane, but
No, I don't think it sounds insane. I think we need a balance between, I get paid for my two jobs, and I would look a lot more haggard and depressed if I was not earning anything. So I need to get paid for what I can do. But when we've got that satisfied, I think especially with the military focus, think about what you can do in any small way. It might be at your Rotary, it might be, I don't know what. There's so many volunteer organizations, but a small, if it's possible, sometimes that level of service for numbers of individuals is just too much, and that's cool. But where there's room to have a little bit of service in your life, that's the real feel good stuff. It floods the brain with dopamine and good feeling stuff when we're giving without expecting anything in return. And again, that's a core value in the military. We don't do things for our brothers and our sisters because we want things in return. We do things because there's a deep love between each other, and it is a love. I have many veterans and my mates, and our conversations may finish with love you, brother. And some of the guys I do talk to, it's about brothers. No, that is the purest form of service,
And I
out of
think that's
love.
the beauty of serving, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Like, if you get
true.
nothing out of serving your country, being a part of that community is just beautiful. Uh,
Yeah.
you know that I can't say anything more about that. I'm glad
Mm,
when I moved to San Antonio that I quickly found a community here. I'm not
yeah,
best friends with people by any means, but having
yeah.
that community and speaking the same language and being through some of the same trials and tribulations,
Mm,
and just showing that love for each other, it's just
exactly.
amazing.
And even with the work that you're doing and the service that you're doing as you connect with people around the world and within the States, that is service and that is tribe. You are connecting in tribe. I am so gifted by the individuals that are now called friends that I've never met face to face, but they are brothers. And that is back in tribe. So you are in tribe also in terms of the work you do.
I can see that. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
This is why I like
Listen,
talking to you.
Christina, think about it. I come out the military and I'm meander around doing all this crazy stuff, even forgetting about those times. And when I finally get this inkling that there's this other part of me I left behind a long time ago, now, outside of my work in my school, all I do is I work with military. I do not work with civilians. It's all referrals from our organization. Yeah, it could be the civilian as the partner or the child, but I only focus within referrals from that. Why? Because I'm also in tribe, and it's a tribe I have a deep love for and a connection with. So, as much as I may change people's lives by being in tribe with all these extraordinary individuals, my life is changed. So,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, there why I have not forgotten tribe. I'm back in tribe, but I'm also in the civilian world. So there are ways to do it. We do
Yeah.
not need to get lost, and we do not need to. There's ways of recreating tribe, not in terms of going back to where you were, but just what you can do. Even the act of service is tribe.
Sometimes I feel guilty that all my marketing is towards, the military community. But when you put it that way, I mean, this
Yeah,
is my community. And, you know, it, so I'm not taking care of my apartment complex, right? Because that could be a community as well, but I'm taking care of my
yeah,
community, and my community extends well beyond,
yeah.
my 1 block radius here. And that's where my heart is.
I didn't even, I didn't even get close to apologizing because I've had people saying, look, we hear this is the work you do, and they civilians, and I go, look, mate, my focus, and I'm really full, is I just tend to work with the military environment. So sorry, this is not something that I can be offer you, and I'm not apologetic about that. I consciously chose the territory that I wish to operate in, and I've spent 19 years of my life trying to get better at it in every way possible, so that I am truly of service. And I'm not apologetic about that. I this is what I want to do in my life, and I get huge meaning and growth from walking this journey with these extraordinary human beings.
I'm
So
so appreciative of you and all the work that you've done. I really, I am. And I'm glad that you reached out to me. You just really have been a positive light in my life. Um, and you really make me think, and you make me grow. And I appreciate that so much, because that's where I need to be at in my journey right now.
Well, you and I are in tribe and back at you too. So, I have huge respect and care for what it is you're doing. And, you know, 3 years ago, I didn't even know anything about LinkedIn, and I valued the people that I just got got on there and started. It's like, and all these people were just opening their doors and opening their homes to me. And, we all there, we all together on this shoulder to shoulder. We just walking as a tribe, doing the best we can. So, appreciation goes back at you and all of us who just trying to create healing and maybe reduce the lives that didn't have to be lost. So
Yeah.
let's just keep doing it. And as we all do, we keep our connections going. And thank God to the internet, you and
Right.
I will have, more connections in some of the groups that we may frequent together, and the tribes we kind of may walk together through. We're in tribe.
We are. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
I
Uh,
will.
I hope we get to chat again soon, and I do want to get on that Thursday group. I'm going to go look and see if I've been approved to go join for next week. So,
Yeah, if you haven't, just let me know, and I'll follow up on that.
okay, cool. Thank you so much, Barry.
Yeah, you take care, and thank you for this opportunity. And it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Nice. Same back. All right. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.